June 20, 2021. May we now stand for the singing of the national anthem, please. Okay, still seem to be having some technical difficulties there. So we are now going to continue this presentation today. So as I said earlier on, June 15 every year is commemorated as the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. The acronym for that is WEAL, and we use this opportunity to highlight one of the worst manifestations of ageism and inequality in our society. Elder abuse is very simply defined as any act which cause harm to an older person and is carried out by someone he or she knows, but not only knows, but also trusts, such as a family member or some friends. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was launched on June 15, 2006 by the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and the World Health organization. And World Elder Abuse Day, its commemoration really, aims to provide an opportunity for communities around the world to promote a better understanding of elder mistreatment by raising an awareness of the cultural, the economic, the social, and demographic factors that drive and influence elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So, we give this day some amount of prominence at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. I think right across Jamaica, we have begun to recognize that people are living longer these days. Hence, the age of retirement was moved in recent times by our government for both males and females. But there's also the thing called active aging. So not because people are getting old means that they are useless and can't contribute anything to society. The Bible tells us that they have a responsibility to pass on to the next generation of Jamaicans some of those good qualities as it relates to our cultures, our norms, and our morals. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends all, we are coming to you live on several platforms, JIS Facebook and YouTube, as well as the ministry's own Facebook and YouTube. And we are also joined by PVCJ, Facebook, and YouTube. I must apologize for the absence of our Minister of Labor and Social Security, the Honorable Carl Samuda, who is unavoidably absent today. He has duties to perform for an international forum for the ILO. And he is being represented today by a state minister in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the Honorable Xavier Main. So Minister Main, we welcome you to this this forum here today. We have in our midst, ladies and gentlemen, oh, and I should also apologize too for the permanent secretary, who very much would have loved to be here, but is caught up elsewhere doing business for the ministry. We have today our presenters, and it's a star-studded team, and we look forward to hearing from them as they talk to us today about the whole business of elder abuse and how we can indeed take actions to either limit or prevent this from taking place. So we have Dr. Deladell Wiley Tyndale, and Dr. Tyndale is from the Mona Aging and Wellness Center. We also have Mr. Glenford Thompson, and he's from the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and of course, the unit that deals with violence against persons and their financial fraud that from time to time occurs. We also have with us Mrs. Essence Monroe Douglas, and she's an attorney at law, and she will talk about elder abuse from the legal perspective. And we also have Ms. Maisie Francis, and she is a psychologist, and she will be talking to us about effective coping strategies for elder persons. So on and all, we have a very good lineup of persons, and I'm sure that when we shall have come to the end of this presentation, the awareness will be heightened, and there'll be more love and more care in our hearts for our elderly. So as we move into the presentations, I will now invite Minister of State in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the Honorable Xavier Main, to come now and bring greetings on behalf of Minister Samira. Minister Main.
Thank you, Vando, being our moderator today. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a pleasure for me to be joining you at this an important observation as we celebrate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And Vando, I know you would have apologize on behalf of our Minister Samuda, but I too want to convey my own apologies on his behalf. The minister, as was previously stated, is engaged in another forum and therefore is unavoidably, I should add, unavoidably absent. And in this regard, I convey an apology on his behalf. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, observed annually on June 15, aims to provide an opportunity to promote a better understanding of abuse and neglect of older persons by raising an awareness of the cultural, economic, social, and demographic issues related to elder abuse and neglect. This year's theme, Safeguarding Older Persons During COVID-19, serves as a reminder of the importance to fully address the rights and needs of older persons. It is a call to action for individuals, organizations, and communities to raise awareness of an end to elder abuse. Older persons account for 12.6% of our population. This is expected to double by 2050. The increase in the elderly population, among other global developments, will present an increase to the number of vulnerable and at-risk seniors. The UN Department of Economics and Social Affairs declares that violence, abuse, and neglect of older persons are the most hidden and unreported violations of human rights. This presents a challenge to prevent, respond, and mitigate elder abuse. The COVID-19 pandemic has shed light on reports of abuse and neglect of older persons in their communities and in their homes. Unfortunately, most cases of elder abuse reported are perpetrated by persons known to the senior citizen, oftentimes their very own family members. The Ministry of Labor and Social Security, through the National Council for Senior Citizens, continues to respond to the needs of older persons and to work with various stakeholders to ensure a good quality of life for older Jamaicans. The revised National Policy for Senior Citizens will provide the framework for aging with dignity, ensuring that older persons live and participate actively in our society, which guarantees their rights, promotes their responsibilities, recognizes their capabilities and contributions, and facilitates their enjoyment of a life of fulfillment, health, and security. On this Elder Abuse Awareness Day, I encourage Jamaicans to take care for and protect older persons. Report suspected or actual cases of elder abuse to the National Council for Senior Citizens via the various modes of contact. I thank you for your participation in today's activity and invite you in your various capacities to work with us to eliminate violence, abuse, neglect, discrimination, and all forms of ageism in norms and practices. Thank you and have a good day.
All right, there you have it from Minister Main himself, giving us the policy direction, I would say, from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Now, we are going to be going straight into a video which will highlight our seniors. So I'm just gonna ask the technical people to get that up and running. And immediately after that, we're going to be going into our presentations. And to get the ball rolling, we'll be turning our attentions to Dr. Dudell Wiley Tyndale. So we're getting the video up and
Hold on. Yeah, playing on. Okay. You're not hearing it? Well, skip it then,
All right.
because
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I must apologize for that. Our technicians have been trying to sort out those technical difficulties that they were having with. You're getting a chance to watch and to listen to that video presentation. I think they will continue to work at it, and hopefully by the time we are through, we will be able to give you that video presentation. It's now time for us to turn to our presenters. And I did tell you that immediately after the video, we are going to be turning our attention to Dr. Duladell Wiley Tyndale from the Mona Aging and Wellness Center. And Dr. Tyndale will be focusing on her presentation from the rights perspective. Dr. Tyndale, it's over to you.
Good morning. Minister of State in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the Honorable Xavier Main, Program Organizer for Education and Media, Ms. Nadine Anderson, other members of staff of the National Council for Senior Citizens and the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, fellow presenters, ladies and gentlemen joining us on the various platforms, good morning. I hope everybody is doing well today. It is a beautiful morning and it's a very important morning as well. I want to commend the National Council for Senior Citizens for organizing the events surrounding today's observation of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. This is a very important day, as Mr. Palmer had spoken about earlier. And so I just want to acknowledge them for the effort for putting this together. I also want to thank them for the invitation to be with you this morning. At Mona Aging and Wellness Center, we are committed to improving the health and well-being of older persons. And so we're always happy to participate with individuals and in events where this goal is to improve older persons' health and well-being. We see it as our responsibility really in this space. So we're very happy to be here. So as Mr. Palmer said, I'm going to be talking to you about the rights perspective when we look at elder abuse, but it's important to contextualize things. And so I want to start by defining elder abuse. So we'll talk about what it is and why it is important to have a definition. We'll then move on to look at some insight into the scope of the problem. It's a bit of international literature and some of the local insight that we have. And then we are going to talk about addressing elder abuse in the context of human rights and what that really means. So what is elder abuse? It is defined, or it has been defined rather, by several entities and individuals. In fact, there is no universally accepted definition, single definition for elder abuse. When we hear the term, I think everybody comes up with an image or an idea in their mind, because let's face it, we've had a lot of experience with family violence in our society. So we are familiar with terms like child abuse. We know about intimate partner violence. And so when we hear elder abuse, the wheels start turning and we sort of get an idea of what is being hinted at. The World Health Organization has put forward a definition. They describe elder abuse as a single or repeated act or lack of appropriate action occurring within any relationship where there is an expectation of trust, which causes harm or distress to an older person. The Inter-American Convention on Protecting the Human Rights of Older Persons also have put forward a definition, and they say it's a single or repeated act or omission to the detriment of an older person that harms their physical, mental, or moral integrity and infringes the enjoyment or exercise of their human rights and fundamental freedoms, regardless of whether or not it occurs in a relationship of trust. So if we try to compare the two definitions, we'll see similarities and we'll see differences. And some of these are pretty important. The notion of it being an act or a failure to act is common between the two definitions. So whether you do something or you fail to do something, it becomes important in the definition. And if it's harmful, it can, I'm monitoring the chat as we speak, and somebody said they're not hearing. Is that the case for everyone?
We're hearing.
Okay, all right. So that perhaps is just one individual having an issue. I hope it gets resolved. These are interesting times, but let's go ahead. So those are the important similarities. But what I also want to draw your attention to is an important difference between the definitions. So WHO says where there's an expectation of trust, but the Inter-American Convention says whether or not it occurs in a relationship of trust. Once there is that act or failure to act that hurts the person, it is still to be classified as elder abuse. The other important term in the definitions is older persons. Now, different jurisdictions have different definitions. So the World Health Organization and most of the bodies within the UN speak about age 60 and older. We know that in many other countries, it's 65 and over. So that is something important too, because we need to know what we're talking about and when exactly is this offense committed. The Inter-American Convention is a little bit more, it gives a little bit more leeway in defining the older person because it recognizes that there will be these variations. So it says it has two definitions. It has an age restriction as well as whatever is accepted as the norm within the country once it's not beyond a certain age or before a certain age. So you will have those definitions to think about. We need to be able to measure elder abuse. That's how we understand how important the issue is. And that's how we know how to plan our responses. And so that's why definitions are very important. So I don't know that there are any efforts right now towards harmonizing the definition, but certainly all of the instruments and conventions and so on that address it have their definition that they work with. And so the subscribers know to what they refer. All right, let's try and move on now. In defining, we also have to take into consideration that there are different forms of abuse. So there are 5 main forms that have been recognized. There's physical abuse, psychological, sexual, and financial abuse, and there is also neglect. So physical abuse has to do with physical force being carried out that causes pain or injury. So we think of somebody hitting somebody, so we think of bruises or even broken limbs. Those kind of injuries and so on would be the result of physical abuse. There is also psychological abuse where there is willful infliction of mental or emotional anguish on the person. And that can be a very difficult one. Sometimes it can be an overlooked one because there are no visible physical scars. And so, you know, people might not readily recognize it, but it's very, very important and can result in depression and anxiety and fear. There is also sexual abuse, which refers to acts of non-consensual sexual contact or any kind of unwanted sexual behavior towards the older person. Financial abuse, we're very familiar with that one, especially in recent times, acts involving misappropriation of the elder's money, property, or their resources. And then there is neglect. So here is where the omission comes in the as we operationalize the definition. This is where the omission comes in. So failure of the caregiver to meet the needs of a dependent older person is a form of elder abuse. How much of an issue is this really? Well, we have a whole day talking about elder abuse awareness, so clearly that in itself suggests that it is a big problem. It is globally recognized as an important public health and social problem. It's a public health issue because it threatens the health and well-being of older persons, and it's a social problem because it threatens to pull apart our social fabric, our moral fabric, the things that we value. It can result in grave physical injury, long-term psychological effects, and life-changing consequences, such as socioeconomic consequences for the victims. One of the things that we know, and everything you read on elder abuse will allude to this, that it is underreported. There are estimates that suggest that only 1 out of every 24 cases of elder abuse is actually reported. And there are many reasons for failure to report. Sometimes people feel as if the situation will be worsened if they report. They're in dependent situations, and so they feel that, I might go and talk, then something happens, and then, God knows what will happen to me thereafter. One of the things that we have to acknowledge, though, and not just acknowledge, but think about how we're going to respond, is that with global population aging, elder abuse is expected to increase. All right, so as the world gets older, as we have more older persons in our population, we're going to expect to see an increase in elder abuse. Now, that can happen because, as the older population increases, there becomes difficulty now with finding resources to address the different needs that emerge. And so people can become, more upset at the fact that, we have to be sharing these scarce resources. And then that kind of thought process can manifest itself in some kind of physical or psychological harm to older persons. But even outside of that, even if the rates at which elder abuse are occurring now were to remain constant over time, we would still expect to see an increase just because of the sheer numbers of persons who are now going to be older and therefore more vulnerable. So it is a big issue, and it definitely warrants our attention and our response. There is some evidence from research to clue us in on the scope of the problem. This is an international study that was done. It really is pooled data from several studies across developed countries and developing countries. What they found was that there was an estimated 15.7% of prevalence of elder abuse in the community. So that's 16 of every 100 older adults reported experiencing elder abuse. When they looked at institutional settings, the numbers were also staggering. And we have two types of data here. We have data coming from the older adults and older adults themselves and their proxies. And we also have data coming from staff at institutional settings. So for the overall prevalence of elder abuse, so that takes into consideration all the different forms that we spoke about earlier, 64.2% of staff in institutions reported that they perpetrated acts that could be considered as abusive. When you look through the table, you see the estimates for the different forms of abuse now broken out. So psychological is the big one, 11.6% in the community. That's 11 or almost 12 of every 100 persons. And roughly about 33% in the institution. Physical abuse is less in the community, about 3%, so that's a good thing, although we know that there is some underreporting there. And about 14% reported by older adults in institutions. Notice that there's a little bit of disparity here. 14.1% reported by older adults versus 9% reported by staff. Financial abuse is also an issue there, neglect and sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is the least perpetrated act according to the data that is available. Neglect is pretty high in the institutions compared to in the community. So that gives us an idea of what is happening from a global perspective. When we come to Jamaica, and I know we have Mr. Thompson who is going to speak later, so I can't even try to address what he's going to talk about, but just if we just grab some headlines, we hear them all the time. A lot of what we know locally is based on data or information reported in the media. So we see things happening, and every time it happens, everybody gets alarmed and we go, oh my goodness, this is so horrible. And then, we forget and move on with our lives. But we need to remember that these are things that some people are actually going through on a daily basis. Persons getting killed, persons being treated in ways that rob them of their dignity, persons being physically abused, and the list goes on. So we don't have any research evidence to give us an indication of the statistics, the prevalence of elder abuse in Jamaica, but we do hear of the incidents, and certainly the ones that are reported to the police, numbers can be obtained from that. There are several factors that can lead to elder abuse. I've classified them in 3 categories here. We have older adult dependency, abuser characteristics, and societal ageism. So a dependent older adult, whether it is physically dependent or financially dependent, so you might have somebody who is physically frail, and so they need people to do the basic things for them, to bathe them, to change them, to feed them, to do their housework, everything. You have people who might have cognitive impairment, so they might have dementia. And so they are not able to function on an intellectual level, and so they are dependent on people to provide care. That puts them in a vulnerable position and increases their risk for elder abuse. There are also some characteristics of the abuser. So persons who use or abuse substances, persons who are in stressful situations are more likely than their counterparts to perpetrate acts of elder abuse. And there is also societal ageism, which can basically breed that kind of action. It provides the environment, the social environment that can foster, for want of a better word, elder abuse. So societal ageism force or allows us to think in negative ways about older persons, to feel negatively and to act negatively. That's stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination towards older persons. And if our society tolerates actions like these, then it increases the risk because our values would have been skewed. And so it provides the environment where these actions can thrive. I think we have to mention something about COVID-19 and elder abuse. Certainly, there is information coming out of the international sphere that there have been reports of increase in family violence in general since the pandemic, and in particular with elder abuse. In Europe, for example, there have been reports of older persons being abandoned in care homes, and that happened specifically in Spain. Italy, where 23% of the population is 65 years or older, had a major issue when they were at the height of their experience with COVID-19. And in their hospitals, they were actually using chronological age, nothing else, just your age, as one of the factors that would determine whether you got a ventilator or not. Because, the age is the biggest risk factor for mortality, right? The older you are, the more likely you are to die. And so they simply said, it was ideas like, okay, well, they're probably going to go anyway. So let's push our efforts where there is a person who is likely to live longer. And that is definitely not the way to go. There are many countries experienced and had to implement restrictions governing movements. We've done it in Jamaica too, and other parts of the Caribbean. And in some of the first world countries, the age-based restrictions were very, very strongly opposed. They saw them as ageist and they did not feel valued. Interestingly enough, in Jamaica, some older persons felt that by implementing these kinds of restrictions, it suggested to them that the government actually cared for the well-being of older persons and therefore wanted to protect them. But in first world countries, some first world countries, it was viewed differently. Older persons have also, since the pandemic, faced psychological abuse. There have been several social media interactions that really devalue older persons. I don't know if you guys saw the hashtag that had been trending on Twitter, boomer remover. They were calling COVID the boomer remover. Now, the baby boomers are most of our older population now, right? So they're up in their 60s, 70s. A lot of older persons died, we know, when they had COVID and suffered from the complications. And so this was being described as something that removed or killed older persons. And I mean, it might be true. We're not saying it's not factual, you know, but you can't go around saying things like that will make people feel disparaged. And these are some of the kinds of abuse that older persons have experienced during this pandemic. So we want to address elder abuse through the lens of rights. All right, we want to talk about rights. What does that even mean? Well, one of the foremost documents on human rights is the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which was ratified in 1948. And that document is freely accessible online. You can take a look at it. It's founded or grounded in several principles and several truths that we accept. And I've just slipped out one of those truths. In recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. All right. In recognizing that is a premise on which these rights are based. All right. Just because you have been born into the human family, you have inherent in you dignity. You have inherent in you an entitlement to certain freedoms. These are rights that are equally shared, should be equally shared among everybody. They cannot be taken from you and they cannot be given up by you. That's what they mean by inalienable. All right. And it is when we recognize this fundamental truth that we are able to act in ways that will guarantee freedom, justice, and peace. Our rights perspective tells us that when we treat older persons well, we're not just doing them a favor, or we're not acting out of the goodness of our heart, but we're doing something that is our responsibility because everybody has rights to certain dignities and freedoms. All right. So a rights perspective shifts us from a welfare-based system and a welfare way of thinking. You know, that's a help out a person, but it's a higher calling, if you're following me. You know, it calls you to recognize who we are as people and what, because we're created people, what we have inherent in us, all right, that no human gave to you or can take away from you. A rights perspective, therefore, sees infringements not just as acts of mistreatment, oh, she's so cruel, but it's actually a violation of your basic human rights. When we talk about rights, we have two main groups of people. We have rights holders and we have duty bearers. So the rights holders in this case will be the older persons, all right? And a rights approach or rights-based approach actually empowers older persons, because within the rights, you will have clearly articulated entitlements, right? It will be clearly spelled out what you are entitled to. And also what will be clearly spelled out is what will happen when people violate those rights. So that in itself empowers the persons who have the rights. It also entrusts within these persons a responsibility to act in their own interests. So we're not saying older persons should not passively sit and wait for people to give them their due. We're saying that older persons need to speak up for themselves as rights holders and ask strongly that their rights be recognized. And with rights also come responsibilities, okay? So rights holders also have to respect other rights holders. So in basic, behavior, you can't be exercising your rights to the detriment of mine. So we have to respect each other. A rights perspective provides a framework in which the duty bearers can be held accountable. So the duty bearers can be people like, it's usually the state. So it can be the government, the persons who will act in terms of writing laws and preparing the framework within which rights can be exercised. It also includes persons who can act as the conscience of society. All right, those are also duty bearers. So when we have rights clearly articulated, our duty bearers can be held accountable for acting, right? They can be held accountable because their actions should really surround three things: respecting, protecting, and fulfilling the human rights. So as they write laws, and we have somebody speaking about the legal perspective, they have to think about that. As they enforce laws, they have to think about that. So this kind of approach is the best approach for handling elder abuse, even if it's just from a fundamental conceptual standpoint. When we think about what rights are and who are entitled to certain rights. Now, I mentioned the UN Declaration of Human Rights as the milestone document in the history of human rights. And I pulled out just 4 articles, and I want to wrap with this. I wasn't doing well with checking my time. I do apologize. But these 4 articles are very, very important for elder abuse in particular. Article 1 says, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. So clearly, if everybody accepts and behaves in light of this, then we wouldn't even be having this day. We wouldn't have need for this, because everybody would recognize everybody else's rights and would protect those rights. But it's important because it forces the duty bearers to act. Article 3 says everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Again, this says to us that actions of abuse, we spoke about the 5 different forms of abuse, have no place in a society that embraces Article 3. Article number 5 says no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Again, this can create the system where there can be sanctions when these rights are trampled on. And then Article 25, Part 1 says everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing and medical care, necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of employment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. So everybody has the right to earn, everybody has the right to be protected in the event that they are unable to take care of themselves. So these 4 articles of the 30 UN articles, the articles in the Declaration of Human Rights, I think specifically address elder abuse and provides a framework within which elder abuse can be addressed. There are several other principles and declarations and conventions that exist, not several, but a few that exist that really have stemmed from this declaration. And that's why in the interest of time, I only mentioned this one, but there are others that have been used to create the framework within which elder abuse can be addressed and the rights of older persons protected. That is where I will stop for now. I thank you very much for your attention. I hope you got something. Hope I didn't go too fast. I kind of felt like I was on the clock, but I thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Thank you so very much, Dr. Wiley Tyndale, giving it to us there, the whole business of elder abuse from the rights perspective. And don't forget the rights holders and then those who are duty bearers, and of course, the different types of abuse. We all deserve to lead happy lives, free from abuse as we age. Through community outreach and statewide engagement, today's activity raises this social issue to a worldwide priority that must be addressed and prevented. We are going to be moving on, and we are going to be going straight to Mr. Glenford Thompson from the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and his presentation will deal specifically with violence against older persons and financial fraud. So elder abuse, as you heard earlier, is global and it comes in many forms, including emotional, financial, physical, neglect, and of course, sexual abuse. So, Mr. Thompson, the platform is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Yes, so I am presenting on violence against our elderly, along with the financial crime as it relates to our elderly. But before I begin, I would like to send a message to both the elderly victims and also the abusers. I will start off first with my message to the abuser by saying, I am begging, I'm pleading, I am instructing, I'm warning, whatever adjectives that we'd like to use to stop the abuse of our elderly. It is a low, degrading, demeaning, it's a nasty act. And if those words bring forth any offense to you, it means that you have some sense of consideration and some sense of feeling. And if it's help that you need, I would advise you to get help. As it relates to our elderly, I would like to encourage you to hold your head high and be proud, because forums like these are just a form of indication of our love for you, our appreciation for you, and how much we treasure all the contribution that you have put in the development of us as people in our society and ultimately the country that we love, Jamaica, right? So now I'm going to do a presentation of let's put a stop to elderly abuse. And the core of the presentation is mainly to provide tips and how to protect ourselves in terms of the abuse and how to protect ourselves in terms of our finances, right? So I will begin. Yes, why are we here? So we are here because of some grim reality. And the grim reality is that the game has changed. The world we know it has changed, right? And one of the change in which we have to cope with is that we are going into an aging population, which means that there's some point in our life that most of our population going to be on the aging side. And this is not only a local problem, this is a global problem, right? And I say that to say that it is predicted that in 2050, the global population of people aged 60 and older will be more than double. In 2015, we have 900 million. They're predicting that in 2050, we're going to have 2 billion. So it means that we all have a responsibility to stop elderly abuse, right? It means that we all have to come on this bus, this car, this truck, and steer it properly in order to stop this gruesome act, right? And as my colleague earlier stated, that elderly abuse don't have a specific definition. It ranges from different categories based off the type of abuse. And I have some here where physical abuse range from slapping or shoving to severe beatings. And some of these abuse can, based off our experience, can be reduced when our seniors find themselves in groups such as the National Council of Senior Citizens, in groups such as church groups, in groups such as even police, youth club, volunteer groups, groups such as the Kiwani clubs, the Lion clubs. And these clubs provide more opportunity for persons for the elderly to interact with persons who they can trust. And that is very important in their life, because a lot of times our elderly are being abused in silence. And when they have someone or more than one person that they can trust to talk to, it is actually a step in order to reduce the chances of them being abused, right? We also have when caregiver gives a silent treatment as a form of abuse, or to intimidate the individual by threatening them is also an abuse. Intentionally failing to meet the physical, social, and emotional needs of our elderly, it is also an abuse. And one of the areas in which this presentation is focused on is the financial abuse, can range from misuse of funds to embezzlement. I mean, the Caribbean Community of Retired Persons in 2020, they stated that two of the most common forms of elderly abuse in Jamaica is financial abuse and neglect or abandonment. As such, I want to provide some additional tips in battling against financial abuse. So the first tip is that, and I'm not advertising for the banks, let me say that clear, but one of the reality that we have to come to accept is that as we advance in our country and in the world, the use of cash, hard cash, physical cash, is really reducing. And we are now being placed to use the bank even more, our online transaction even more. As such, we are encouraged to open an account and do our transaction by using these accounts. Now, there are benefits to having an account, and the account provides us to do transaction as we go about our daily life, in the way that we have mobile apps, internet banking, online banking, we call it. So the online banking provide a way for us to track our money. So we no longer need to go inside of the bank in order to get a bank statement to see our daily transaction. You can log into your mobile app, look at your transaction and see it in real time or close to real time, right? It also provides us with the opportunity for us to pay our bills online. So for our elderlies who can't manage the walking or the traveling up and down, we can use these instruments that we have at our disposal to provide our livelihood by paying our internet or electricity bill or water bill, even our phone bill. But it comes with some limitation that we have to focus on certain things in order to protect our finances. And some of them are what I've listed here. And these are some that I see as some of the most important. The first is pay attention to developing your password. The password is very important, it's critical, because it's the first line of security for your finances. So put in your name or put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or from 5 to 1 is not a good password. It's a very weak password. And I think now we have system that would prompt you to say that you need to put a better password or a stronger password because of the importance of this line of security. Now, in developing a password, please, although it's supposed to be a difficult one, please select one that you're able to remember, right? The second is do not click on links that you're not familiar with, especially if it requires you to enter your personal information or your banking information, right? A lot of times we get some pop-ups when we are scrolling online, or we get some pop-ups within our email, and the pop-up instructing us to click on a link. Or click on a link, we saw several things to be filled out, or we saw your wins money, or you can enter into contests and these things. If you're not familiar with them, leave them alone. If it's a situation where you have question around them, find someone who you can trust for them to look at the information, right? The third is try not to log into your online banking or your mobile app through the public Wi-Fi network. I think when you access the public Wi-Fi network, it increases the chances of the hackers to hack inside of your phone or your electronic devices in order to manipulate your information, to include your banking information. And the fourth, always remember to log out of your online banking app or your mobile app, all right? I'll now go to the automatic teller machine, the ATMs. Sure, we interact with these several times, for some persons on a daily basis, right? And it provides us to put cash inside of our account and to take cash outside of our account. Provide a perfect avenue for that, including send money to another account as well. But as I said before, these comes with some limitations, so we have to be careful and mindful of some of these things while we're using these devices. And the first one is that we have to be aware of our surroundings, particularly at night. Because when we use these machine, they are situated at several different places. Some are at the bank, some are at gas stations, some are even on plazas. And we have to be careful how we go about using each of these. So some things we have to have in our mind when we are going about using these machines. So the second one is have your ATM card ready in your hand as you approach the ATM. This is put there because from time to time, it's not only our elderlies, but even younger persons. They wait until they reach to the ATM machine. They dig in their handbag, and when they dig in their handbag, you see the amount of money coming up. You see the car key, you see the purse, you see everything coming up. And it provides the perfect opportunity because your attention is down in the bag, while the abuser or the predator attention is zooming at you. So there's no time for you to be aware of your surrounding because your focus is in the bag to get the card in order to use the machine. And that's a strictly no-no. You provide a perfect opportunity for the predator to take advantage of you, right? So what we're encouraging is that you take out your card from before you go to the machine, right? The next thing, the third, is visually inspect the machine before using it. We know, even have in our jurisdiction, something called the skimming devices. As you can see the picture below, you see that device looks so similar to the device that is on the machine. And what they do, they plugged it on the device to the machine. So when you put your card inside of it, it skims your information, right? So what we are encouraging is that before using the machine, try to pull on it to see if it's moving. And if it's moving, I would advise that you don't use that machine, right? You can also feel around the machine to see if you feel any sticky substance or if you see the scratches or any abnormalities to the machine before actually
Mr.
using.
Thompson, just to advise you that you still have a minute for your presentation, so bear that in mind as you conclude. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. So the next thing is to be careful that no one can see you entering a PIN. So when you're putting in your PIN to use the machine, try to cover it with your hand before putting in your secret PIN. Always take your receipt for your transaction and your records, right? Very important, it shows what coming out of your account. Do not count or visually display any money you receive from the ATM. Again, it provides a perfect opportunity for the predators. ATMs that are in poorly lit areas, to try not to use them. If the lighting in the ATM is not working, do not use it. Going to the ATM alone is not advisable. Try to find someone who can accompany you. If overgrown trees are blocking the view of the ATM, try not to use it. As with a point of sale machine, never let your card outside of your side. Don't allow persons to walk away with your card, right? Do not use the merchant with a point of sale machine that are not visible. A lot of locations have the tinted area where you have to push in your card. You're not seeing what's behind the tinted area. Try not to use your card there. Right? Do not provide any personal information to the merchant other than your ID. And do not divulge your PIN to anyone, not even your family member. If you have to, try to find one specific person that you give your PIN to. So in case of anything, that one person have to account, right? Beware of your surroundings and always have your card ready as you approach the point of sale machine. Cover your hands again when entering your PIN, your secret code in the machine, and verify the transaction value prior to finalizing your transaction. You mean to look at the machine to see if that's the amount of money you want to come out of your account, right? And check your statements
All right,
regularly.
I'm sorry, but that's where
And
we
with
will
that, I
have
thank
to
you.
leave it
Yes.
for now. Thank you so very much for that very timely and informative presentation. I'm sure that during the discussion period, there might be questions that will be raised. I'm just reminding our YouTubers and our Facebookers that we are streaming live on the JIS Facebook and YouTube, as well as the Ministry of Labor and Social Security's Facebook and YouTube platforms, and of course, not to be outdone, the PECJ. We want to hear from you, so we want you to share and to make your comments and to have your questions coming, as we want you to participate in this very, very important seminar looking at the whole business of elder abuse, as today is being commemorated as that day with the theme safeguarding older persons during COVID-19 and beyond. So thank you so very much for that, Mr. Thompson. We have in our midst another presentation that will be coming from Mrs. Essence Monroe Douglas. I'm told that she is an attorney at law, and therefore she is now going to speak to the whole business of elder abuse from, you've got it right, the legal perspective. So, Mrs. Douglas, it's over to you.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies, and a pleasant afternoon to our Minister of State, Mr. Xavier Main, Ms. Nadine Anderson, Program Organizer. Let me share my screen at this time. All right, let me lend my voice with my fellow presenters in denouncing violence, any kind of abuse or neglect of our elderly persons. Let's look at the rights of our elderlies, the cry for help. For those who are online, I want you to know the signs to look out for somebody who is crying out for help. Elderly persons, because some of them are not always in their right minds. Some persons are suffering from dementia, sometimes they just don't recall. They can easily be abused. So you have to look out for the signs, the cry of help, and then see how best to assist them. I'm going to speak to the legal rights that they have and how you can assist them in. So elderly abuse includes, as Dr. Tyndale says earlier, physical, emotional, or sexual harm inflicted upon an older adult. Their financial exploitation, as Mr. Thompson said, or neglect of their welfare by people who are directly responsible for their care. No. Elder abuse tends to take place where seniors live, and this is why it is difficult for them to speak up. Oftentimes it's by family members, their grandchildren, a spouse or partner, and hence they are afraid and ashamed to talk or unable to remember the evil that is perpetrated to them. So that is why we have to look out for it. It can also take place in institutions. And so we want to now focus on, what are the laws that are available to them. Our first up is our Constitution. Dr. Tyndale spoke about the rights perspective. And so I want to reiterate the point that currently there is no established legislation speaking specifically to elder abuse or the protection of our elderly. And I want to say at this time, we need to look at crafting a legislation specific for them. Nonetheless, human rights are enshrined in our Constitution, in particular, Chapter 3 of the Constitution. And it mentions that it protects the right to life, liberty, right to enjoyment of property, protection against arbitrary arrest, and certainly the protection from inhumane treatment. And so I want our elders to know that you have the right to enjoy the property that you have acquired during your lifetime. and that in your twilight years, you have the right to enjoy the life that you have. Not because you are now old means that you must give up all these rights and just disappear. God has still endowed you with the right to enjoy life in your older years. So you should be protected from inhumane treatment. There are certain laws in place, though, that assist in the protection of the elder from abuse. Looking at 4 of them this afternoon: your Domestic Violence Act, Offenses Against the Persons Act, Sexual Offenses Act, and of course, your Maintenance Act. I want to start with the Domestic Violence Act. By definition, it includes our elders. As we said, there's no specific legislation, so we have to incorporate them into the various provisions of these acts. So the word dependent includes a member of a family of a respondent, being a person who is 18 years or older, who normally resides on a regular basis with that respondent, and a person who, by reason of physical or mental disability, because of their age or their infirmity, they're reliant on that respondent for welfare or maintenance. So once you find yourself in that category where you are reliant on somebody else to take care of you, whether because of your physical disability, your mental disability, or your age or your infirmity, then you will form under this category of dependence. So where do you go if you find that you're being abused? You go to your resident magistrate's court, or you can go to your family court. So an elder who is being abused can make an application before the court for protection orders. Section 3 states that the court may on application grant a protection order or an occupation order. And these 2 orders are very important, especially if you're being abused. So who can apply for these orders? These persons, if you are being threatened, then persons include a person with whom the dependent normally resides on a regular basis, a parent, guardian of the dependent, a dependent who is not mentally disabled, a person who is approved by the minister responsible for social welfare to carry out social welfare work, or a constable. So any of these persons can apply for those orders. If the protection order is breached when the court grants it, the respondent commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding $10,000 or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months, or both. Now we want to hasten to say this is the reason why we are asking for either an amendment to the act or an act that speaks specifically to our elders, because that fine is not a deterrent. So let's look more closely now at persons who may think you are at the risk of losing your home or you're being kicked out of your home. What can you do? Section 7 and 8 of your Domestic Violence Act allows for an application to be made for occupation order. Application may be made to the court by or on behalf of a prescribed person, so it can include you or any of the listed persons I mentioned earlier, for grant of occupation order, giving the prescribed person named in the order the right to live in the household resident. Very important to know. I know some of our elders are concerned about being taken out of your own home that you have worked so long and hard to acquire and just being put somewhere else, or find yourself out on the street. You can apply to the court for an occupation order. So I want you to remember these 2 orders: your protection order and your occupation order. Now, subject to Section 3, the court may make an occupation order granting the right to occupy the household residence for such period or periods and on such terms and conditions as the court thinks fit. So the judge will look at the situation and make the order that is best for you under the circumstances. And the court may make such an order if it is necessary for your protection. So really, at the end of the day, that is what they look at, your protection, when they're making any of the 2 orders. We now look at the Offenses Against a Person Act. This is our second act that seeks to punish crimes against humanity, such as murder, theft, and arson. The Sexual Offences Act 2 seeks to punish crimes of rape and grievous sexual assault against our elderly. No, sexual abuse, it is on contact with an elderly person without their consent. Such contact can involve sexual acts, but activities such as showing an elderly person pornography, that's wrong. Material forcing the person to watch sexual acts, or forcing the elderly to undress. All these are considered sexual abuse. I want you to know your rights. Any of these things that happen to you outside of your consent, it falls under the Sexual Offences Act, and it is wrong. So maintaining the elderly now, so move to the Maintenance Act, and you see in the picture, it's a generational picture. So you have the elderly person, you have the son, and you have the grandson. This is really what we encourage in our society. Each generation should take care of the other. And so the Maintenance Act is a critical legislation for the elderly. Section 10, every person who is not a minor has an obligation, to the extent that the person is capable of doing so, to maintain the person's parents and grandparents who are in need of maintenance by reason of age, physical or mental infirmity or disability. So that's critical to note. So you have this legislation, please utilize it. And so if you're online and you're listening, you have the right to take care of your parents or your grandparents. Under Section 12, an application for an order for maintenance of a dependent may be made to the court by the dependent or a parent of the dependent or any other person who has care and custody of that dependent. So that can include our nursing homes. They are the ones who may have care and custody. You can make an application to the court for the children of such person or grandchildren to maintain them. Where a local authority or government agency is providing assistance in respect of the maintenance or dependent, or an application for such assistance has been made to a local authority or other government agency on behalf of the dependent, an application for maintenance order may be made to the court by that local authority or government agency. I think our Master of Ceremonies mentioned it earlier that sometimes the government is dealing with elderly persons, and if this is the case, then they have the right to make the application on behalf of that dependent. And so we want to encourage you to know that these are the laws that are available for our elders. You need to know all 4 legislations I mentioned earlier, along with your constitutional rights, and you have the right to make the application. If there's anybody online watching now who is around persons who are elderly and you see any form of abuse or neglect, meaning they're not maintaining them, they are not being kept clean, you can also indicate any of the 5 persons I mentioned earlier, your local government, your constable, any of the family members that you see come to visit them on a regular basis. Speak to them so they can make the application in the court on their behalf. All right, so I'm encouraging you to stop elder abuse. As Nelson Mandela said, a society that does not value its older people denies its roots and endangers its future. Let us strive to enhance their capacity to support themselves for as long as possible, and when they cannot do so anymore, to care for them. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow.
Wow, that was spot on. I was just about to tell you that you have 2 more minutes to go, but then I listened carefully and I recognized that you were winding down and you were out in a flash. But very, very interesting perspective, the legal perspective as it relates to the whole business of elder abuse. You did mention something that piqued our interest, and I'm sure it must have piqued the interest of those who are watching us on the different platforms as well, about the specificity of legislation relating to elder abuse. And I'm sure when we get to the section for the discussion segment that it is going to come back, because this is definitely where either Minister Samuda or Minister Main, as the policy leaders, right, would have to come in and ensure that this is done in the shortest possible time. Now, it's interesting when you are in my position moderating these kinds of fora or seminars. It's amazing the things that go on behind the scene that your viewers can't see. But it was quite frantic inside the conference room here as the technical people try to sort out that video that should have been shown to you earlier. So now that they have indicated to me with all confidence, that is, that this video is now ready, we are now going to make that presentation to you. So let's see.
Moment of truth.
The following drama presentation that you're about to see is a reenactment of actual events. Names have been changed to protect identities.
Point values are double. We got top 7 answers on the board. After a good first date, the girl plans her wedding. What does the guy do? Nathaniel. Plans his funeral. Plans.
Oh, somebody's at the door. Coming, coming. Oh, hi. Good morning. This way. Come in. Oh, you have a lot of things there, man. Daddy, this is Miss Suzette.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, dear. Don't bother this, sir. Everyone calls me Master.
Why, Daddy, you know, easy, you know. Suzette, step over there and have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. I just want to thank you for agreeing to stay with my precious daddy here.
Proper take care.
You hear that, Daddy?
Morning.
Morning. We can get some tin mackerel and plain rice for breakfast.
You're gonna name me cooking, no? Very tired of my old father. I know I'm not gonna take care of him old father. But put on the water for bed, yo. So get up out of the bed. Me beg you take off your clothes. What you do so long?
Suzette, beg you little help now, please.
For piano. How are you so long?
Suzette, beg a little help now.
Push it on. You know what do this? Your breakfast ready. So you can still make the tea cool.
Beg a little help now, please.
Well, that.
What is? If you never have enough saltfish, make you never cook something else.
Oh, well. Yes. Go lie down. Maxine, yeah, girl. But they upon a piece of dirty work. But tired of them and them old father. I don't know what them don't come take care of him. Yeah, girl. But don't like the man. I do him some things. Girl. I can't bother with that woman, yeah. I have no credit. I still call her back at a done. I mean, still call her back, Maxine.
Suzette! 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 Come change me now. Suzette! Come change me.
Nah, don't.
Suzette! Come change. Change me now, please. Suzette! Suzette!
Sure, me tell you to watch them damn piece up something here, I know. And ugly old red man, stop calling me. Nasty. Me have a young girl can gain. But you have to sign over everything to her. Me have an infection, but if you have a condom, me will give you peace.
Come out of my room. God, God.
Hi, Daddy. How you doing? Let me tell you what's been happening.
Food that you have.
Yeah, you want some? You want it? All right, Daddy. Wait, let me help. Daddy, oh, you move so hungry. Daddy, you're eating like you haven't had anything to eat all day. Oh my.
I'm back tired. I want to lie down.
You need my help, Daddy?
Yes, dear.
Okay. All right.
Ow. Ow. Ow.
Bed sore? Daddy, how did you get bed sores? And you have a caregiver living with you. It's my father. Bed sore. Daddy, Asuko.
You leaving?
No, Daddy. I'll be here until tomorrow.
Suzette, don't raise me up now. Please.
Jesus Christ! You're gonna kill
so she treat me all the while.
Dad, me say if I must know the one wicked suicide they had to daddy. Somebody need to come take her out of the house right now. Dad, that wicked girl suicide me said, if me touch her today, somebody better come here and want her out of the house now.
Morning, Daddy.
Here.
I'm not sure yet, Daddy.
You can bathe me before you leave, please. Bathe me before you leave, though. Come help me to the living room. Oh, God. Look what me come to. Look what me come to, eh? Look what me come to. Mama! Mama! Look what me come to. Look what me come to. Look what me come to, eh?
I'm Alicia Steele, producer and presenter at Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica. Wharton, who not think the elderly have feelings too?
Stop abusing the elderly. And don't let them feel like them is a burden.
What gives you the right to treat them this way? Who not think gonna go and stay young forever?
Stop the uncivilized behavior.
If you suspect that someone is being abused, whether it's a family member, a friend, or even a neighbor,
don't ignore it. Blow a whistle, report it.
Stop abusing our elderly.
Stop it.
Stop it. Stop it. No.
Thank you very much. Welcome back after that very touching video on elderly abuse. Of course, it speaks to the very important thing of how we live our lives and how we plan for retirement, because we're not going to be able to work every day of our lives. Very, very important indeed. So for those of us who are out there and you're within the reach of my voice, or even seeing me on any of these platforms, the appeal goes out to you to stop the elderly abuse. We've been getting not many questions, but we've been getting a whole lot of commendations, because those who are viewing what is happening here today have been commending us and telling us how very informative they find the information that is being shared by our presenters here today. And it's timely that on this, the 15th of June, as we commemorate World Elderly Abuse Day, that this information goes far and wide. I'm looking forward to the section when we are going to be going into that panel discussion with our panelists. A number of questions have been coming in, and I have a sheet full of questions. So please stay tuned for that. Now, the geologist will come out and tell us that they are studying rocks, and they can take us outside and point to a stone and say, this is what we're studying. The psychologist tells us that they are studying the mind. And one may question, does one really have a mind? And if they do, where is that mind and how does it function? Well, to tell us more about this, the perspective on the whole business of coping strategies that we can use in order to protect the elderly against elder abuse, I have with us today Ms. Maisie Francis, who is a psychologist, and I now take the pleasure to invite her to make her presentation to us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Palmer. Let me say good afternoon to everyone on the platform this afternoon. It's really a pleasure being here. I'm really elated to be sharing on this platform this afternoon. Let me share my screen. The world we live in today is easy for us to become inundated or emotionally distressed by all that is happening in our society today. And of course, people of all ages, we face different challenges and life stressors. But healthy coping skills is what will help us to become resilient and manage, also overcome difficult situations in our lives. Additionally, using healthy coping mechanism can help to feel calm and for you to be in control. Today's presentation looks at some coping strategies that can be used in your late adulthood and how you can manage or you can enjoy this gift and those who are in charge, who are taking care of our elderly. All right, so the presentation today looks at a definition for coping, identifying age-related changes that affect psychological functions. It describes the risk factors that may lead to poor coping mechanism, and also we will identify effective coping strategies for the elderly. Coping. It's the process of contenting with the difficult life situation in an effort to overcome or to work through them. It's about being resilient. Just like this plant, you are striving against the odds. So let's talk about some of the age-related changes that may affect the psychological function of the elderly. 1, retirement, death of friends, widowhood, or chronic illnesses. These are just a few, but of course there are so many other changes that do affect our elderly. Let's look at retirement. Now, when we look at retirement, it's a change. Of course, it's a change. You used to getting up, going to your 8 to 5, but guess what? Now you're home. You don't have that luxury anymore. What is it that you do? For some, loss of income, right? Loss of identity, loss of status. or loss of purpose in your life, loss of even your contacts because you're not in that work environment anymore. Those persons may not be your friends anymore. And so what this does, it put a strain on how a person may relate, how a person may behave. And this may sometimes lead to what we call as stress. So it's very important for our elderly to understand that when it reaches retirement, yes, there are some changes that will happen. And how is it that we will deal with them? And that is what I'll be focusing on as we go further into the presentation. Now, it also looks at death of a friend, loss of companions, even threats to our own morality, as in, is it that I'm going to die as young as my friend, my best friend Joe? Right? And you think about these things, and of course it adds to the psychological function, it adds more stress than what you're already facing with just being aging and how we may be treated as time. And even as we looked at that video just a while ago, I was really taken aback at the reality that some of our late adults go through. It's really something that I'm really passionate about. The elderly, I really love them. And sometimes I wish that I could do more to actually ensure that they are safe, they are protected, and they are loved. And that is why I'm so grateful for this opportunity this afternoon. Also, widowhood, this lady or this gentleman that you know for your entire life, she's now deceased or he is now deceased. What is it that you are going to do? How is it that you are going to live without this person who is so significant, who has been so significant in your life? And it's hard to start over at this age, 75. Right? It's hard to date again, to go into the world, to socialize. It's really hard. How is it that you actually cope with these kind of situation? Chronic illnesses, and yes, the hypertension, the diabetes, these lifestyle illnesses. How is it that you cope? These are all adding to the psychological function of how a person behaves. And then when all these stressors, as we call them, they come into play, then you realize that this will cause a change in behavior. So we will now look quickly at some of the ways how the elderly can actually cope despite all the challenges or all the stressors, right? One, it's important for you to participate. So you participate in social activities. Maybe it may be a church function or something in your community that you love, that you enjoy. Develop a firm identity. What is it that you love? What is it that you enjoy? It's also important for you to talk about your feelings. How is it that you're feeling? Talk to somebody who you can trust, who you know has your best interests at heart, and who would sit and listen to you. Right? Not somebody like the lady in the video that is going to say, I have a friend, but you have to will over everything to her in order to be with her. You want somebody who can guide you, who will be there for you, who respect you for who you are, who you respect, and you express how you feel. Talking about how you feel is very important. And sometimes we don't like to talk, but guess what? We can also write. Write down how is it that you're feeling today? What is it that is causing you to feel this specific way at this specific time? Right? Maintain good health practices. I know sometimes as elders, we sometimes lay back because of our stressors again, new changes, sometimes new environment. But it's important for you to get your regular checkups, right? Go to the doctor, eat well, have a balanced meal. It's also important. What is also important is for you to exercise. Yes, do some gardening or walk for 30 minutes. For those who may not be able to move out and about, there are things that you can do inside your home, right? And you're still practicing to exercise. Maybe you can walk to wash the dishes or just to sweep the house, but ensure that whatever you are doing, you're getting in some physical activities. Take advantage of educational opportunities. It's never too late to learn. You can take a course, learn a new skill. And as I said before, talk about your feelings. Communication is very important, but who you communicate with is also important, and that will make the difference. Throughout the presentation today, we heard from various personnel. These are persons that you can actually talk to, and they will be happy to help if you do have any questions, any query. Keep mentally stimulated. So enjoy conversation. Talk about some current affairs. Talk about whatever it is that is happening, whatever it is that you enjoy. Do you like sports? Talk about it. Read. Get the newspaper, see what is happening in and around you. Join a discussion group. It is also important for you to have support groups. So join a group that is like-minded to discuss things that you enjoy discussing, and also maintain good health practices, just as I said before: nutrition, exercise, rest, communicate, participate, develop a firm identity, talk about your feelings, maintain good health practices, take advantages of educational opportunities, and I'm sure these will help you to better cope with being an elder, making a contribution into our society, because you are loved, and it is said that those who respect the elderly pave their own way towards success. An elderly person at home is like a living treasure. So I implore you to love the elderly, to take care of them, because guess what? You are paving the way to your success. Thank you very much. Mr. Palmer, over to you.
Undo the video. All right. Thank you so very much, Ms. Francis, for that very interesting presentation about coping strategies that we can all use as elderly persons try to survive living and to prevent themselves from being abused. You know, the elderly are very valuable citizens of our society, and they should be treated with care, with dignity, and with respect. The National Council for Senior Citizens will advocate on behalf of the elderly population of Jamaica, especially as it relates to all forms of abuse. Therefore, the celebration or the commemoration of this day is a call to action for individuals and organizations and communities to raise awareness on the whole business of elder abuse. Now, there is a hotline that the National Council for Senior Citizens has that you can call to report any form of abuse that you may be experiencing. I'll go through it very slowly for you. 1-888 seniors. That's 1-888 seniors, or 906-9277 or 906-9278. That's the hotline number. And remember, if you are being abused, you can always reach out to the National Council for Senior Citizens. Since they might be a little away from you, your best bet would be to find a very responsible person in your community, your justice of the peace, the pastor, the principal of a school. And back in my day, the postmistress was always among those group of persons. But failing that, the police is also standing by to assist you and to protect you as you live your last days or your elderly days in peace and harmony. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank the PBCJ for that video. It was produced by them, very timely, very informative. It was a reenactment, but I'm told that it's actually the reenactment of a true story. Very heart-touching indeed. So I also want to say to the presenters that the information that you have given us today, very timely, very, very informative. And from the reactions that we're getting from those who have joined us on social media, they have enjoyed the presentation. I think that there were some questions that came in as well. So we're now going to go straight into the panel discussion section. And I think that this is where, from the legal perspective, Mrs. Essence Monroe Douglas did indicate to us that currently we do not have a specific legislation on our books that deals with the whole business of elder abuse. So my question to Mrs. Monroe Douglas is, what should be the approach from here on in as it relates to us getting that piece of legislation that can speak specifically to the whole business of elder abuse, so that you don't have to depend totally on all the other pieces of legislation on which you can find bits and pieces here and there?
Right. Thank you for the question, Mr. Palmer. My suggestion, as we have looked as a nation on Child Care and Protection Act, I would recommend a similar approach taken by the government, and I know our state minister may be listening, a similar approach, registry setup. It would be far easier for persons who want to report acts of abuse, neglect of our elderly, if we take the same approach that we do with our children. Sometimes we have to create fines in order to push the society to really report. And that's what we have done with the Child Care and Protection Act. The legislation is ethical. So we want to take the same approach as it relates to our elderly, a legislation that speaks specifically to them, tying in all the various components from the four legislations I mentioned earlier, along with our constitution. It will make it easier. The fines will be amplified because the $10,000 fine, as I mentioned earlier, will not deter anyone. So we need for a committee to be established. And I think there was something in the pipeline, but the ministry will have to correct me on this. There was a thrust a few years ago to establish something similar to the Child Care Protection Act and set up a register. I'm not sure where we have reached with that, and which committees are in place to really move this forward. But I do believe that at this time it is needed. Based on COVID-19 and based on responses that would have been coming in, Mr. Thompson can guide us here. If they see any increase in abuse or persons reported at the hospital, and you see the increase in abuse to our elderly, so I do believe it is needed at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Douglas, Monroe Douglas. Now, you did make mention of some kind of amendment to the Domestic Violence Act. Could you give us a little bit more? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that for us?
Right. Well, as you see in the presentation, presently the fine is $10,000 or 6 months imprisonment for those who breach various application orders. However, the fine is not a deterrent, and this piece of legislation also looks at violence against women and children as long as it's domestic, so it's nothing specific to our elderly. So this provision I have to speak to is general, and the fine is not a deterrent. It needs to be increased, and I don't know, I cannot propose any time period or they quantify the fine. It is really a committee that would have to look at that. But right now, $10,000 is not a deterrent to anybody. And we do see in the court sometimes, because it's our loved ones, persons who make the application or bring a claim in the court, they oftentimes do not follow through with it because they're so tied to the loved one. They do not go through with the claim.
Okay. Now, in Jamaica, there is this notion that if you write your will early, then you are expressing a death wish. And so not many persons write their wills, maybe not until the very last minute on their beds when the breath is about to go. So the lack of a will or estate and retirement planning, you know, with the whole business of a power of attorney, it suggests that these might contribute to many cases of elder abuse. What would you say to persons who definitely need to have a change as it relates to that perspective about writing wills, and what are some of the very important aspects of ensuring that you have your will in place?
Well, what we have seen in practice as attorneys, there are several persons or several cases that go before the court that would have been better served had a will been written. There are many occasions where all that has been worked for during the lifetime of the deceased, at the end of the day, it comes down to little or nothing because persons end up in the court fighting each other as to who should get the benefit first in line, contributed more than their life, and the fight continues in the court. It wastes the court time, and the money just goes out into legal fees and just a complete waste of time. So we are always attorneys put on presentations just telling me it is just a matter of setting your house in order so that at the end of the day, the loved ones who you want to get the benefit will actually get the benefit. And that is why you put in place your will. Now, there are certain legal requirements to having a valid will, because if it's not done properly, of course, it's going to fail the probate process. So it has to be done in the legal standard to ensure it does not fail. There are certain gifts that has to be met, but you have to ensure that those are not jointly held. anything that's jointly held cannot form part of your will. And of course, for insurance provisions, whoever the beneficiary is that is named will get the benefits upon your death. So those are things that you don't put in your will. But for property that is held as a tenant in common, you can will those. Your benefits to the various ministries or your whatever your occupation is, you're going to acquire those can be your will. So there are other things that can put in there, as I said, that will come to you and your benefits, but those that are jointly held cannot form part of your will. But we encourage persons to make a will, so to avoid the chaos that ensues after your death.
Thank you very much. Now, this one I think might be directed to Mr. Glenford Thompson from the Jamaica Constabulary Force. You did give some tidbits about the utilization of ABMs and so forth, but I have noticed, and there are many persons who have also noticed, that in the banking halls themselves, where these machines are placed, from time to time, older persons, when they go there, tend to have a lot of regard for people in uniforms, the security guard, for example, and they will go to them for assistance in utilizing the machine because they're afraid they don't understand fully how to do that. Mr. Thompson, is that a safe thing to do?
Well, one of the duty of the bank, well, one of the practice of the bank is to provide persons there to assist persons who are not knowledgeable about how to use the machine. One of such persons tend to use, I'm not 100% sure, but I've seen the practice where the bank also asks the security to assist with assisting persons how to use the machine. As it relates to safe practice, I think a representative from the bank in which you're using would have to be able to answer that question. But for me, what I do know is that this security, I think it's Guardsman Security, they are the one who maintain the machine. And they are the one who clear the machine. And whenever there's a fault within the machine, they are the one who are called on into assist in that sense, right?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Now, we have another question coming in here from Nadine Wilson at the Gleaner Company. And there's a little bit of preamble to the question. It says, in Jamaica, some fathers especially neglect their responsibility to their children to the extent that these are children who do not know their fathers or refer to them as sperm donors. In these situations, do children have a responsibility under the Maintenance Act to support the father listed on their birth certificate?
Okay, based on the Maintenance Act, Section 14, there are 14 parameters that you will consider in giving an order as it relates to maintenance. One section, Section L, under 14, it says the court will look at the quality of the relationship between the dependent and the respondent. So that is one criteria that is listed that the judge will consider. What has your relationship been with your father? They will consider that, along with your financial standing, whether you're able to or not. So for those who are concerned about absentee father, the judge will actually look at that under Section 14L. So that's the section.
Okay, then, good. And as a follow-up to that question from Nadine, she wants to find out, can you provide any statistics as it relates to the whole business of the prevalence of abuse of seniors locally? Locally, I think she means in Jamaica, and she wants to find out how many persons have so far called to report a case through the hotline at the National Council for Senior Citizens. And I'm being told that we don't readily have that information at hand, but Nadine Wilson will certainly get that for you as soon as we possibly can. Now, there was another question that came, and it says, how do you draw the line between elder abuse and the inability of a caregiver to effectively care for older persons presenting with a mental illness, especially dementia or Alzheimer's? Who wants to take that one? Maybe the psychologists? Ms. Francis? What do you think?
All right.
Or, yeah.
Good question. In situations like these, it's important for that caregiver to understand what is it that he or she is actually doing in providing care for persons with mental illnesses such as dementia or Alzheimer, because these are persons, if you do not understand how they relate, how they behave, then you will end up becoming frustrated, and that frustration you will now take it out on the person who you are giving care to. So it's very important that these people understand the psychological impact, the behaviors of the elderly that may suffer from these conditions, and how is it that they can help them. So training is very important in this aspect.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm getting the wrap-up signal from my landlord that our time in this particular location is almost at an end, but we did have another question that came in, and it says, how mental illness may impede the reporting process for older persons. So the older persons are, they have some form of mental illness, how does that impede them reporting the abuse that is being meted out to them? Who wants to take that? Ms. Francis? Nobody wants to take that one? Or is it a no-brainer that if the person, pardon?
Yes, I was going to say, because you have to prove, it's always difficult when you have to prove, when you bring a claim, if you're unable to even recall what has happened to you. So that would be a difficult one to prove. You are suffering from dementia. I mentioned earlier that it can be persons who are around, whether family members who keep visiting and observe that there's some form of abuse being meted out to them. They see them with a black and blue eye, and so they will start to ask questions, and they're the ones then who will make the report. And we had mentioned 5 lists of persons earlier that you report to, including a constable. So it is actually the family members, friends, neighbors who will actually be looking at these persons when the persons are suffering from dementia, who will make the report to the relevant authorities.
Right, thank you very much. I'm frantically getting the wrap-up signal, but I really can't go until I ask Ms. Nastasia Nunez, who's a program organizer for health at the Senior Citizens Council, to come and just to say thanks for the way in which you guys have really, come to play today and have really presented the country with some very informative and helpful information as it relates to the whole business of elder abuse. She's sitting in for Cassandra Morrison, the Executive Director of the National Council for Senior Citizens, who was unavoidably absent today. So, Ms. Nunes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Palmer. The pleasure indeed is mine today to be offering the vote of thanks. And on behalf of the board, the chair, and the executive director of the National Council for Senior Citizens, I would first like to thank the Honorable Minister of Xavier Main, Minister of State, Ministry of Labor and Social Security today for having brought greetings on behalf of our Honorable Minister Carl Samuda. I, of course, will also want to thank you, Mr. Palmer, for having been such an able moderator for our proceedings today. And I just want to remind persons about the importance of elder abuse and the importance for all of us to bring awareness to this issue. Seniors are the backbone of our communities, and the National Council for Senior Citizens continues to do everything that we can to ensure that we bring awareness to this issue and also to empower seniors within this process as well. As such, it is only fitting for us to have a program such as this today, and that would not have been possible without the coordination of the program organizer for education and media, Ms. Nadine Anderson, who was behind the planning of this program today. I would also like to use this opportunity to also thank, or what I would call the pillars, the nuts and bolts team here at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, or public relations team, for always being present to ensure that our programs and activities, especially in light of COVID and the fact that we have to be going virtual, are always there to support us and to ensure that everything goes smoothly. Further, we would like to thank the JIS, Jamaica Information Service, for being our technical support team today to ensure that everything went well. As we continue to raise awareness for elder abuse, I want to let you know that today's proceedings would not have been achieved if we did not have our presenters here with us today to make this possible. And the organizations that also rally with the council to ensure that they too do their part in bringing awareness. Today, we especially give thanks to our presenters who came on board to give up their time and also of their knowledge. Firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Dula Dale, Willie Tyndale of Mona Aging and Wellness Center. I would also like to thank Mr. Glenford Thompson of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, as well as Mrs. Essence Monroe Douglas, attorney at law, and finally, Miss Maisie Green, psychologist. Based on our platform today, of course, as it is, would have been our pleasure to physically be handing you our token of our appreciation. But rest assured, our valued presenters, that you will be presented with tokens after the close of our event today. To make today's proceedings seamless and also to ensure that everything goes well, I would like to also further thank all those seniors who joined us today, because of course without our virtual audience we would not have been able to have such an important discussion and panel discussion today. As I close off with my vote of thanks, I want to remind us that elder abuse awareness is not just an issue for individuals or for senior citizens, but it's also an issue for all Jamaicans as we aim to continue to protect our most vulnerable population. And as we close, again, let us each reach out and speak out as we fight against elder abuse. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nunez, for moving the vote of thanks for us. Ladies and gentlemen, and my YouTubers and my Facebookers, we wouldn't have been able to do this without the platforms provided by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security and by the Jamaica Information Service, as well as the PBCJ, our abled partners. So big thank you go out to them as well. And you know, it's the end of the seminar today, but I'm sure it's not the end of this dialogue about the whole business of elder abuse, as we show our senior citizens that indeed we love them and we care for them And we'll never ever forget to say thanks to them for having dug the well from which we are now drinking our waters. Thank you.